Have you ever thought that a small gesture from someone you least expect could shake your entire heart? I could never have imagined that. An ordinary afternoon led to a stronger family bond and deeper mutual understanding between me and my stepson. A thoughtful gesture of appreciation. And from there, our relationship as stepmother and stepson grew closer and more trusting. Watch this story and join me as we explore what happens when kindness, closeness, and deeper family bonds begin to weave their way into a family that once seemed perfectly stable. You won't believe what happened next. My name is Amanda, 48 years old, living in a peaceful suburban town where the quiet pace of life and the small, tree-lined streets have been part of me for over 20 years. I work as a librarian. A simple job, but one that brings me joy through every turn page and the gentle conversations I share with local residents. My life had been fairly smooth, a long marriage to my husband Peter and a close-knit family, not perfect, but full enough. Peter has a son from his previous marriage named Ryan, 22 years old. Ryan doesn't live with us regularly. He studies at a university in another city and only comes home during holidays or on rare weekends. Ryan and I have a polite, pleasant relationship, but there's always been an invisible distance between us that I've never dared to cross on my own. Ryan is a tall young man with a solid build, bright gray eyes, and a slightly mischievous smile. Even though he's not my biological child, I've always shown Ryan a quiet, gentle kind of care, like a stepmother who longs to be acknowledged but never wants to force it. I know he loves his father and in some ways still keeps his distance from me out of loyalty to his biological mother. I don't blame him. In fact, I've learned to be content with the small place I hold in this relationship. On one ordinary Saturday afternoon, I was tidying up the kitchen when I heard a car pull up outside. I didn't think it would be Ryan. He usually doesn't come home without warning. But then the door swung open and Ryan appeared, carrying a sports bag, a bright smile on his sun-kissed face. "Hi, Mom, Amanda," he called, his voice slightly playful, something rare to hear. "Is Dad home?" I smiled, wiping my hands on my apron. "Your dad just went to work a weekend shift. He probably won't be back until tonight, but you showing up like this is quite a surprise, dear." Ryan shrugged, dropping his bag on the floor. "I thought I'd come visit Dad and you for a bit, and also," he paused, a bit hesitantly, "I have something I'd like to ask your help with." I was a little surprised. Ryan rarely asked me for anything, aside from small favors like his favorite meals or a bit of laundry. He looked at me with sincere eyes, tinged with a touch of shyness. "What is it, dear?" I asked softly. Ryan smiled slightly, then stepped a bit closer, and in that moment, the distance between us seemed to shrink. "I want to prepare a surprise dinner for Dad, to thank him, and I need your help." I felt a warm surge of happiness, not because of the request itself, but because of the unexpected initiative from Ryan. In that moment, I saw the stepson I had always observed from afar, now opening a small door into my world. I nodded, a wide smile spreading across my face. "Of course, dear. I'm happy to help." And just like that, an ordinary afternoon became the start of a story I had never anticipated. A story that wasn't just about a surprise dinner, but about the journey of bridging distances, of touching emotions that had long lain quietly dormant. That afternoon passed in a strangely touching way. Ryan and I were in the kitchen together, preparing Peter's favorite dish, beef stew with red wine, which I had cooked for so many years, but this time there was an extra pair of helping hands. Ryan's. He took off his denim jacket, rolled up his sleeves, and began washing vegetables, chopping onions, doing all the little tasks I usually did quietly on my own. Every so often, I glanced over at Ryan, feeling a closeness that was different, unfamiliar. He smiled, chatted, shared some stories from school, and asked me for a few cooking tips. I wasn't used to seeing Ryan so open until now. He had always maintained a certain careful distance, always polite but reserved. "Mom, Amanda," Ryan said, his voice slightly hesitant. "I know I don't say this much, but thank you for always being here for Dad, for keeping the house warm, and for today, too." I froze for a moment, the knife in my hand pausing midair. Ryan had never said anything like this before. I turned to him and saw his eyes filled with sincerity. Not the casual kind, but something real. I felt genuinely touched and grateful for his kind words. "You don't need to thank me," I smiled softly, trying to keep my voice natural. "I'm happy to see you home and even happier to cook with you." Ryan scratched his head, a little shy. "I think it's time I learned to show more gratitude." Hearing him say that, I suddenly realized that all these years I had assumed I was standing on the outer edge of the bond between him and his father. I thought Ryan already had a biological mother in that place, so I only needed to quietly do my part. But in that moment, I understood. Ryan didn't just see me as someone who kept the house. He saw me, truly saw me. While the beef stew bubbled on the stove, we set the table together, arranged a small vase of flowers I had just picked from the garden, and lit some candles to make the dinner feel a little more special. I felt like I was living in a small but precious moment, a moment of connection. When everything was ready, Ryan quietly walked over to me, leaned down, and gave me a light, slightly awkward hug. "Thank you, Mom," he repeated. I stood still for a moment. I felt deeply moved by his unexpected kindness. Then I lifted my arms and gently hugged him back, softly, but enough to send the unspoken message I had never had the chance to say before. "Thank you, my son." That surprise dinner wasn't just for Peter. It was also a gift from Ryan to me, a gesture that, though small, was enough to melt away the invisible layer of ice between this stepmother and stepson that had lingered for so many years. That night, after Peter returned home, the kitchen filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Peter kissed me on the cheek, laughing heartily when he saw the steaming beef stew on the table, praising Ryan as truly the man of the family now. Ryan just chuckled, shoulders shrugging lightly, his eyes briefly glancing toward me as if to share a silent message. I sat down at the dinner table, feeling a strange sensation creep through me. With every spoonful of soup, every exchange story between Peter and Ryan, I kept smiling, kept joining in the conversation, but deep down, it was as if I was waiting for a beat that had been missed. I wasn't used to this feeling of being seen, of being appreciated like this. Not just by Peter, but by Ryan himself. When Peter left the table early to take a work call, only Ryan and I were left. The room suddenly quieted, filled only with the faint clinking of spoons against plates. I started gathering up the dishes, standing up. But Ryan spoke softly. "Let me do it, Mom. Sit down." I paused, startled, turning to look at him. Ryan smiled, his eyes gentle. "You're tired. Let me." I felt pleasantly surprised by his thoughtfulness. I told myself, this is just a grown boy. Being thoughtful, being helpful, nothing more than that. But when I watched his figure moving around the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, hair falling across his forehead, I suddenly recognized how mature, thoughtful, and grown up my stepson had become. I clenched my hands together, feeling my heartbeat shift slightly off rhythm. Part of me felt happy, cared for. Another part felt uneasy. I had become so used to playing the quiet, undemanding stepmother, never stirring the waters, never letting myself be shaken. But Ryan's attentiveness, the way he looked at me, the way he intentionally reached into the space around me, it all made me start to wonder, am I imagining things? Or has something quietly shifted between us? I sat silently on the sofa, listening to the faint clatter of dishes from the kitchen, my mind tangled with thoughts. I didn't want to disrupt this family. I didn't want to create a dangerous misunderstanding. But the warmth, the stir, even the slight trembling I'd felt when Ryan hugged me unexpectedly that afternoon, it lingered there, refusing to fade. That night, as I lay in bed next to Peter, I listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. One of my hands rested on my chest, feeling I felt emotionally unsettled. I closed my eyes, telling myself tomorrow will go back to normal. This is just a fleeting moment. Usual. Ryan also woke up early, greeted me with a bright smile, and quickly went out for a run. I told myself, that's right, he's just a sweet boy, caring. I shouldn't overthink this. But the strange little moments kept slipping in. In the afternoon, I was out in the garden trimming the jasmine bushes near the fence. The sun cast a gentle golden glow, and a light breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. Ryan returned from basketball practice, sweat beading on his forehead, his sports shirt draped casually over his shoulder. "Need any help, Mom?" he asked, his eyes lighting up, his breathing still quick. I was momentarily flustered, shaking my head. "It's okay, I'm used to this." But Ryan didn't listen. He stepped closer, took the pruning shears from my hand, his fingers briefly brushing the back of my hand, just that fleeting touch, yet I felt deeply moved by his thoughtful and unexpected kindness. We stood side by side under the tree, Ryan carefully cutting away the withered branches while I just stood nearby, my hands loosely clasped together. Everything seemed ordinary, but the air between us wasn't. Now and then, Ryan would glance up, our eyes meeting. We both gave small smiles, then quickly looked away. That evening, after dinner, when Peter had gone to bed early from exhaustion, I sat alone in the living room watching TV. Suddenly, Ryan came downstairs from his room, holding a cup of hot tea. "I made this for you," he said, his voice warm and low. "I remember you like to drink chamomile tea at night." I took it, my heart flooded with a mix of emotion and confusion. I wanted to thank him, to tell him how much I appreciated this small gesture, but the words caught in my throat. We sat next to each other, watching a lighthearted movie just a few inches apart. I felt genuinely moved by his thoughtful gesture. When the movie ended, Ryan turned to look at me, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen. "Are you happy, Mom?" he asked, his voice low and deep. I froze slightly, my lips trembling, unsure how to answer. Such a simple question, yet it made all the masks I'd carefully built feel suddenly fragile. I gave a small, evasive smile. "Of course. Why do you ask?" Ryan looked at me for another second, then smiled gently. "That's good," he murmured, standing up. "Good night, Mom." As he left the room, I sat there in silence, my hand clutching the teacup tightly, feeling as if I were standing at the edge of a hidden whirlpool, not knowing where it was about to pull me. The next morning, I tried to bury myself in busyness. I scrubbed the floors, did the laundry, even reorganized the bookshelf that was already neat. But every moment I met Ryan's gaze, every lingering question from the night before, "Are you happy, Mom?" kept echoing in my mind. I kept telling myself I was fine, still in control, but my heart refused to listen. In the afternoon, Peter called to say he would be home late, caught in a sudden meeting. I wasn't surprised, I was used to it. The dinners for two, the long nights with only my own shadow by the window, looking out at the darkened yard. But today, Ryan was here. "Let's cook dinner together, Mom," Ryan suggested, his voice cheerful while I still hesitated in the kitchen. I smiled, nodding. We cut vegetables, sautéed the meat, tasted the soup together. Ryan stood close, very close, his hand occasionally brushing mine as we both reached for a spice jar or a bowl. Those moments of kindness were brief and casual, yet each time I felt deeply appreciated and valued. When the table was set, Ryan pulled out a chair for me gentlemanly. "Please, Mom," he said, his eyes glimmering with a playful smile. I didn't understand why I blushed. I was his stepmother. I'd always believed that the difference in age and roles and family were sturdy boundaries, unshakable. But with just a few gentle touches, a few tender questions, I felt conflicted, wondering how to appropriately respond to this new closeness and family connection and appreciation. Dinner passed in light laughter. We talked about movies, books, and the trips Ryan dreamed of taking. I looked at him, my heart softening, seeing a grown young man, no longer the shy boy I had once welcomed home from boarding school. When dinner was over, Ryan helped me clean up. Then we both sat outside on the porch. The summer night was gentle, a cool breeze rustling through the trees, the scent of jasmine drifting softly in the air. I closed my eyes, savoring the rare peace, but then started when I felt a light weight on my shoulders. Ryan kindly placed his shawl around my shoulders. I appreciated his thoughtful and respectful gesture. I stood up quickly, making an excuse to go brew more tea, but inside, I was flustered. In the kitchen, I gripped the hot teacup tightly, trying to steady my breath. Why was my heart stirring like this? I had always believed I was someone who knew how to keep limits, who knew right from wrong. But now, those boundaries suddenly felt fragile. When I returned to the porch, Ryan was still there, gazing up at the star-filled sky. "You know, Mom," he said softly, "I've always admired you. You're strong, gentle, and you always know how to make this house feel warm." I felt profoundly moved by his sincerity. Those weren't the words of a boy speaking to his stepmother. Those were the words of a man, someone looking at me not just as the caretaker of the family. "Ryan," I whispered, but my throat tightened. He turned to me, his eyes glistening under the porch light. "You don't have to say anything," he murmured. "Just let me stay by your side." We sat beside each other in silence, neither of us speaking another word. I clutched the teacup. I felt moved by our improved closeness as family and was unsure how best to express my appreciation. That night, when I returned to my room, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, my hands still remembering the feel of the shawl Ryan had draped over my shoulders, his warm voice, his gentle gaze. I closed my eyes, telling myself that by morning everything would return to normal, that I was just tired and overly sensitive. But deep down, I knew nothing was normal anymore. The next morning, I woke up in a haze. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting the room in a soft, pale gold. But inside me, nothing felt gentle. I had barely slept all night. Every sound in the house, every movement from Ryan was etched sharply in my mind. I went down to the kitchen and saw Ryan already sitting at the table, scrolling on his phone. His eyes lifted when he saw me, and for a brief moment, I caught that look. Warm, gentle, and with something in it that made my heart tighten. "Good morning, Mom," Ryan smiled, his voice light as if nothing special had happened the night before. I nodded, trying to stay composed. "Good morning, dear." We ate breakfast in silence. Peter was still away on his business trip. The house was just the two of us. The air around us felt thick, even though both of us were trying to maintain a normal facade. I could feel every small movement from Ryan, every fleeting glance, every soft-spoken word like an undercurrent stirring beneath a still surface. As I loaded the dishes into the sink, Ryan stepped closer, helping me gather the tablecloth. The space between us was small, just one step, but I felt proud and touched by his maturity and thoughtfulness, and I recognized how much it meant to me. "Let me help you, Mom," he said softly. His hand accidentally touched mine, and I felt a sudden surprise at his kindness. "Ryan, you should go out and meet up with your friends," I stammered, my voice betraying my unease. "It's such a nice day." He paused for a beat, then nodded. "Okay, I think you should get some rest too, Mom." When he left, I collapsed onto a chair, burying my face in my hands. What's wrong with me, I wondered. I am a married woman, a wife, a stepmother. I have responsibilities, morals, boundaries. But why won't my heart listen? The entire day, I wandered through a haze of tangled emotions. I strolled through the garden, tended to the flower pots, hoping to find some peace. But my mind kept drifting back to those accidental touches, those whispered words, those moments when Ryan's gaze made my emotions were unexpectedly stirred by his thoughtful gestures. As evening came, I decided to write in my journal, an old habit I had abandoned long ago. I poured everything onto the page, holding nothing back, the fear, the fluttering feelings, the guilt, and the yearning to be seen, to be understood. At some point, I realized the pages were damp with tears. I can't keep going like this. I need to keep my distance. I have to be the adult in this story, I told myself. But somewhere deep in my heart, a quiet voice whispered, "But I've been lonely for so long." That evening when Ryan returned home, I tried to act as natural as possible. We had dinner, chatted about movies, hobbies, his studies. I laughed, nodded, maintained my composure. But inside, my heart was anything but calm. When he stood up saying he'd go to bed early, I felt a strange pang as if I were hoping for something I couldn't even name. That night, I sat alone in the living room, clutching a cup of hot tea, staring out the window. Everything was so quiet. So quiet it made it hard to breathe. I realized I was facing complicated emotions that needed clarity and boundaries. One step back, and I would return to the safe shore. One step forward, and I would plunge into a whirlpool from which I wasn't sure I could emerge whole. And I knew sooner would have to choose. The next morning, I woke up with a heavy feeling in my chest. Another sleepless night. But this time, it was because of a decision slowly forming inside me. I couldn't keep letting things linger, smoldering like embers under the ash. I needed to face Ryan. He was in the kitchen when I came downstairs. Soft sunlight streamed through the window, casting a honey gold glow over his hair. It was an ordinary, warm, simple scene, and yet my heart still clenched. Ron, can you sit down and talk with me for a moment? I spoke, trying to keep my voice calm. Ryan looked at me, slightly surprised, but he nodded. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his eyes focused, waiting. I took a deep breath, placed my hands on the table, fingers intertwined tightly. You know, I began slowly, these past few days, I've been thinking a lot. Ryan stayed silent, his gaze softening, as if he already sensed what I was about to say. That night, I continued, my voice catching for a beat. That hug, and the things you've done since then. I swallowed hard. Ryan, I know you mean well. You want to care for me, look after me when your father is away, but those things have been confusing for me. Brian furrowed his brows, his eyes shining with worry. Mom, I raised my hand gently, signaling him to let me finish. I don't blame you. Truly, I don't. But I'm scared of myself. The air grew heavy. Ryan lowered his head, running a hand through his hair. I'm scared too, Mom, he said softly, his voice tight. I don't understand what's happening. I just know when I see you sad, when I see you alone, I want to be there for you. But then, little by little, I realized how important your support and kindness were to me as my stepmother. I felt my chest tighten painfully. The words I hadn't dared to admit, Ryan had now spoken. Raw, trembling, and honest. Mom, I'm sorry, Ryan exhaled shakily. I shouldn't feel this way, but I can't control it anymore. I stood up, circling behind his chair, my palms cold. Listen to me, I said, placing a hand on his shoulder, gently but firmly. We need to stop this. Not because I don't care, but precisely because I do. Do you understand? Ryan looked up, his eyes red-rimmed, but he nodded. I understand, Mom. In that moment, I saw the little Ryan from years ago, the innocent, stubborn boy who once begged me for bedtime stories. I placed a soft kiss on his hair and whispered, "You will always be an important part of my life. But we have to move through this phase with strength, not weakness." Ryan stood up suddenly and hugged me tightly. I'll try, Mom. Just please don't push me away. I held him for a long moment, hot tears slipping from the corners of my eyes. I won't push you away, but I need time. We both need time. That evening, when Ryan left the house to meet up with his friends, I sat quietly in the living room, watching his figure disappear through the window. My heart ached, but part of it felt lighter. Today's conversation didn't solve everything, but at least it opened the door to honesty, something I knew I could no longer avoid. I knew the days ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least we had spoken the words, and that was the first step toward finding balance again. The days after that conversation passed with a strange quietness in the house. Ryan still came home every evening, but everything between us seemed more careful now. There were no more overly close moments, no more unconscious touches that left us both flustered. I further realized Ryan was trying to keep his promise. He spent more time with friends, joined extracurricular activities, focused on his studies. I, in turn, spent time taking care of myself. I started going for morning walks, rediscovered the joy in old books, and most importantly, reconnected with Mark, my husband. One late afternoon, when Mark returned home from a long business trip, I was already sitting on the porch waiting for him. His eyes were gentle, but I could see the fatigue clearly. I invited him to sit down, poured 2 cups of tea. My heart slightly trembling. "Mark," I began, "I think we need to talk." He looked at me a bit worried. "What's the matter, honey?" I took a deep breath, listening to the rustling leaves along the fence. Lately, things in our house have been strange. I let myself drift into feelings I shouldn't have had. Things I thought were just because of loneliness. Because of missing you. I paused, my hands shaking slightly. "I just want to tell you that I've realized I miss you more than I thought." Mark didn't say anything right away. He set his cup down and reached out to take my hands. "It's my fault too. I've been too focused on work, leaving you to handle everything on your own." Tears welled up hot and heavy. "Do you think we can start over, Mark?" He squeezed my hands gently, giving me a kind smile. "If you're willing to give me a chance, I'll make it up to you." That night, as we sat together in the living room, sharing the small stories we'd missed over the past months, I felt my heart soften. I knew every marriage has its ups and downs, moments of feeling lost. But what matters is whether we're brave enough to come back, take each other's hands, and keep walking forward. As for Ryan, he had matured after everything. One evening, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen, Ryan walked in, smiling softly. "Mom, this weekend I plan to go on a trip with some friends. I might come home a bit late." I turned to look at him, a young man now, tall, strong, with eyes that no longer held the flickers of past confusions. "All right, have fun," I smiled, feeling a lightness in my chest. As Ryan headed for the door, he turned back, hesitating for a moment. "Mom, thank you for not shutting me out, for not pushing me away, even though you completely had the right to." I stepped forward, placed a hand on his shoulder, and gave him a gentle smile. "We're family, dear. No matter what happens, I'll always be here." Ryan nodded, then walked off, his tall figure blending into the golden evening light. I stood there in the doorway, letting the breeze flow in, carrying away the last lingering burdens from my heart. Perhaps life is never simple. The tangled emotions, the moments of weakness, the small missteps, they're all part of the journey of growing, of learning to let go in order to hold on to what truly matters. I closed the door, turned back inside, ready to step into a new chapter. Not a perfect one, but a chapter I chose with my whole heart. Sometimes life leads us astray down unexpected paths, placing before us delicate challenges we never could have anticipated. But the most important thing is not where we stumble, it's how we stand back up, face ourselves, and choose what we hold on to. I've learned that genuine family bonds aren't about perfection, but about patience, forgiveness, and the courage to reconnect when misunderstandings occur. Family, though often filled with complex emotions, is always a place we can return to, as long as we know how to place sincerity above fleeting temptations. If this story has touched your heart, please leave a comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment of being out of sync in life? Let's listen to one another, empathize, and remind each other that no matter how far we may wander, there is always a way back home.